Hi, my name is Dana Irby, and my presentation will be over civil rights movement to inform the audience of the legacy of Congressman John Lewis. Get into trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble. John Lewis. In 1948, the United States Supreme Court, Scipio versus Oklahoma State Board of Education, rules that states must provide equal access for qualified students. In 1950, the Supreme Court also rules that the University of Oklahoma cannot segregate a student within the school. In 1954, the Supreme Court also rules that segregation in public schools is unconstitutional. In 1957, 1960, and 1964, Congress passes voting rights. In the 1950s and the 1960s, in America, there was a movement struggle going on, a movement for freedom, a movement for equality, a movement for civil rights, a movement for voting rights. And the civil rights movement was established on the framework of nonviolence demonstrations and passive resistance, with freedom rides, sit-ins, petitions, and marches. There was a sharecropper's boy from a small town called Troy, Alabama. Together with his siblings and cousins, they all went to the local library as he tried to get a library card to check out a library book. However, he was denied this right because cards were not issued to blacks. Cards were only issued to whites in 1957. And he also wanted to attend college at Troy State University, but again, it was segregated and whites only. This resulted in the 17-year-old young man writing a letter to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. while he was attending college in Nashville. While he was attending college in Nashville, this young man named John Robert Lewis would become the embodiment of nonviolence in America. Between 1963 and 1966, John served as chairman of the National Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, fighting against segregation through organizing lunch counter sit-ins and demonstrations. When I was growing up, my mother, my father, and my grandparents and my great-grandparents always told us, don't get in the way, don't get into trouble. But John got in the way, and John got into trouble. It was good trouble, necessary trouble, as he would call it. John has now begun a journey of social politics, civil rights acts, and courageous leadership. On August 28, 1963, the 23-year-old John, along with Dr. King and others, gave a as a keynote speaker, gave a speech to over 250,000 people at the Civil Rights March on Washington. In 1964, the city of Selma, Alabama, denied blacks the right to vote. This day would become known as Bloody Sunday, as they began to march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge to Montgomery, Alabama on March 7, 1965. It was supposed to be a peaceful protest, but the protesters were beaten with nightsticks, trampled by horses, and tear gassed by state troopers. However, prepared in advance for jail, with his backpack on his back, filled with an apple, an orange, two books, a toothbrush, and toothpaste, John was the first to be struck in the head with a baton by the police officers. John became a member of Congress in 1986, and he challenged all he had learned from his fight for equality as a young man into empowering youth and minority communities, encouraging activism. He was known as one of the most dedicated, principled, courageous civil rights activists of all time. John Lewis was a titan of civil rights movement whose goodness, faith, and bravery transformed our nation. From the determination with which he met discrimination at lunch counters and on freedom rides, to the courage he showed as a young man facing down violence and death on Edmund Pettus Bridge, to the moral leadership he brought to Congress for over 30 years. John Lewis was known as the conscience of the Congress. John Lewis was arrested 44 times, and 5 of those times were while he was in Congress. I have been in some kind of fight for freedom, equality, basic human rights for nearly my entire life, he said in a statement announcing his diagnosis. I have never faced a fight quite like the one that I am in now. On July 17, 2020, John Lewis's good fight and battle with pancreatic cancer came to an end. People must find a way to get the way, to get to the way, and find a way to get in trouble. Get in trouble. Good trouble. Necessary trouble. That was John Lewis's motto. The fight for equality in the early 1950s and the 1960s were door openers for many people, not just African Americans. Now is our time to fight for equality, to fight for justice, justice for all. We have to we have a responsibility. One man, one vote, and make your voices heard. Get in trouble. Get in good trouble. Necessary trouble.